Hey, Float Magic fans, it's Shawnee coming to you from Float Magic. I wanted to do our second episode on frequently asked questions, FAQs. We get a lot of questions about what we do here and how we do it. And there's some great practices to make your floats and your experiences here even better. So I'm going to go through a few of those. So first and foremost, a lot of people say, hey, how do I float? Like, how should I float? Is a float something you do by yourself? Is a float something you do with somebody else? It's a great question. You can float however you want. We do allow for couple floats. That can be husband-wife, that can be siblings, that can be mother-daughter, father-son. There's the opportunity to come in and have two of you if one of you is a little uneasy about floating. That is a possibility. However, we highly recommend that people float by themselves. The whole idea behind flotation therapy is that you allow yourself that opportunity to be stimulus free. And when there's somebody breathing or twitching next to you, that kind of distracts from that stimulus free environment. So, anyway, so that's what we recommend. But that being said, we've had a lot of couples that have come in and absolutely enjoyed their experience here with us. We're a pretty hot date night location, and people come in and do a massage chair, sauna, float combo, and maybe go grab dinner across the street or somewhere else downtown. So that has also been a very popular service and very enjoyable. So you can float by yourself or you can float with somebody else. Another question that we get asked a lot is, what should I bring? Well, here at Float Magic, we have tried really hard to provide everything that you need to make your experience optimal. So we have towels on site. We have shampoo, body wash, conditioner in our showers. You're going to be asked to shower prior to your float and after your float. And so that being said, if there's special shampoos or face washes or anything or lotions that you use, I would bring those, maybe a hairbrush or comb. But beyond that, we provide most everything else. We have ropes, we have slippers. So if you're doing multiple services, you can just throw on that robe. You don't have to get redressed. You can go from service to service. And those things are accessible. We also have lockers that you can put your items in. So you really don't need to bring much beyond you and your open mind. So we do our best to provide everything for you. How long do you float? That's a very personal choice. Most all of our floats are 60-minute floats. That's the time slot that we allow for that. A lot of our members upgrade because they get free upgrades to 90-minute floats. We haven't had anybody request longer than that. My sweet spot for a float is about 75 minutes. I really love that just 75-minute spot. It does it for me so often. So I allow myself a 90-minute float so I can have that 75 minutes uninterrupted and be able to go through that process of whatever my body needs at that time. So another frequently asked question is, how do we clean our water? Because 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt is not something we replace with every single client. So it's a great question, one that I did a lot of research on prior to putting my tanks into place, because it was super important for me to provide the best for my community. So we have a filtration system that uses a physical filtration. So we have a 1 micron bag. There's nothing getting through that bag. And then we have UV light and ozone that treats the water as it goes through every cycle. And then we also use hydrogen peroxide. We don't use any bleach in our water at all. That is it. it's counterintuitive to the medicinal properties of the Epsom salt that we use, and can cause some chemical reactions to our water. So plus it's pretty harsh on our skin and our bodies, and that Epsom salt has such a beautiful benefit that we don't want to do anything to disrupt that. And so those are the items that we use to clean. We clean in between every single person that uses our sauna, our massage chairs, our Novathor, our floats. That room is spick and span clean, like you're the first person that walked in there that day. That's our goal. And then we also, salt itself is an extremely sanitary environment because of the dense salination. I mean, a lot of drinking systems use salinated water to process their drinking water. So salt in water is a very good way to keep that water clean and pristine. But with those added measures, we really have crystal clear water in our center, and very proud of that. So let's see, some other questions we get asked often: dyed hair. So because we use hydrogen peroxide in our water, and the salt water can be pretty rough on hair, I actually love how it makes my hair feel after a float. I love the Epsom salt solution in my hair, but if you've dyed your hair recently, those dyes can come off in our water, which is a risk of ruining our tank and also ruining your dye job. So we ask that if you've dyed your hair, that you wait a couple of weeks, at least 2, for, browns, reds, purples, blues. Those take a little longer because they're a larger molecule. So they come off a lot easier in our water. So we ask that you give yourself at least 3 to 4 weeks on those before you float in our tanks for that. We also provide swim caps. It doesn't protect your hair completely, but it does keep some of the solution out and some of your dye in. We still will highly recommend and ask of you not to float if you've dyed your hair in the last 2 weeks. But if you have any reservations because of the color choice, like I said, the reds, purples, or blues, then you can use those swim caps that we have on hand. Tanning solutions is another thing. So if you put sunless tanner or any type of tanning lotion on that has a little bit of tint to it, those will also come off in our water. So if you've had a spray tan or a tanless lotion applied, the tanless lotion will probably take about 3 to 4 days to wear off your body. But a spray tan is a little longer than that. It's at least 10 days to 2 weeks. So we just give that 2-week window as well. Ask that, because that will come right off in our water. It won't make our water look very good, and it definitely won't make your tan look good. So we ask that you wait on that process. Another question we get asked quite a bit is, can expectant mothers float? Flotation therapy is wonderful for moms who are expecting because of that anti-gravity, that zero gravity process that happens when you're in our tank. All of that alleviation off your joints, your back, that sweet little baby in there is taking a lot from you. That restful time that you get in the tank is super beneficial. We do ask that there's a window, so it's after 12 weeks and before 36 weeks. And the only reason we say flotation therapy is perfectly safe up until you deliver. However, when you float, you tend to get very, very relaxed. And so we've actually had only on a few occasions where moms got so relaxed that they went into labor the next day. So you can use that for what it is. There's no risk of you going into labor early. That's not the relaxation you experience, but your body will get itself to a really great relaxation point. So, but it's perfectly safe. Otherwise, we provide flotation therapy devices. We actually have a hammock. It's not like a hot tub. It's only body temperature water. We keep our water at 94 to 95 degrees. Not any higher than that. Some people like it even down to 93 external body temperature range. And so that allows for a great, you can stay in that water for a longer amount of time, even though you're expecting. Another question we get asked quite often is, what do I wear in the float tank, right? Not only what do I bring, but what do I wear while I'm floating? Well, we actually prefer to float naked around here. Our mottos are get salty and float naked. Your birthday suit is the perfect thing to wear in the float tank because we're trying to eliminate all stimulation. When you're wearing swim trunks or a swimsuit that's pulling against your body, it can actually be a little distracting. So we ask in our crystal clean water that we have, and you're showering before and after, we just ask that you come all natural and enjoy that float just as you are. So also the other piece of that is laundry detergent and soaps and oils are really hard on our water. And so we're trying to minimize what gets in our water. And that is why you have to shower ahead of time. If you choose, now that doesn't mean you can't wear a swimsuit. We just prefer you don't. You can still bring a swimsuit if that's what's going to make you most comfortable while you're floating. We just ask that you go ahead and shower with that suit on, really rinse it off really well before you get in our float tanks, so that it's free of any outside agents that might be coming in. So another question we often get asked is, what salts are we putting in the water? So we use a really high grade, pharmaceutical grade Epsom salt. We order them from a company by the pallet load. We use a lot of salt around here. We order those and they're specifically made for flotation therapy. It's magnesium sulfate Epsom salt, and it's very, very clean, minimal processed of there's no chemicals in it. Another reason why we don't use the chlorine and only the hydrogen peroxide is because we want to keep that just as pure to that pharmaceutical grade mineral as we possibly can. And so that's what we use. And like I mentioned in earlier podcasts and maybe before, 1,200 pounds of it is what's in each float tank, maybe closer to 1,000 in our pod because it's a little smaller in volume, but it's a lot of Epsom salt that we put into our waters. Speaking earlier, we talked about the filtration and the cleaning process. We do close down on Tuesday mornings. Originally, we were closed down Tuesdays completely, but we were having quite a demand for using our services. So it still might go when we get super, super busy in the week. Having one day where we shut down our center is super beneficial for us, so we can go through and deep clean. We deep clean our tanks, we deep clean our saunas, we have our floors. We're taking off all of our laundry and cleaning shelves. I mean, this place stays pristine because my team is excellent at deep cleaning and cleaning on it. That's kind of the first question I ask on the interview for my employees is, do you like to clean? Because we do a lot of it. And that's why we have such a great experience here. I've had many flotation experiences and I've learned from those. And one of those flotation experiences was when I ate a huge breakfast right before I went into my float. Not a good idea. Because you can't hear anything except your breath and your heartbeat and potentially your digestive system digesting your breakfast. So learned from that experience that it's a really good idea to leave at least an hour between a meal and your float, and try not to eat a really large meal before floating. If you're going to eat a large meal, please do it 2 or 3 hours ahead of your float, because your body, you will hear that entire time it trying to process that meal. It was quite distracting and a little fascinating. Had no idea that our bodies work so hard to get the food through us. But so an hour ahead of the float, eat a little bit of meal. Maybe it's some toast. Try not to drink much caffeine. Caffeine can really affect how you relax in your float. So if you're doing an early morning float, if you're the type of person that has to have coffee when you first wake up, probably an early morning float is not the best idea for you. It's a good idea to drink that caffeine after you float. if you're going to drink caffeine prior to, again, we ask that you do it at least 2 hours ahead of your float. Also, alcohol and other substances, we recommend that you do not use any substances prior to flotation therapy. There's a little bit of an altered state that you go into because you are so much into your mind. And some people fall asleep. A lot of people get the hypnotic jerks while they're floating. So any substances can take away from that experience and also put you in a position you might not want to be in. You are in water. The water's perfectly safe. In fact, it's near impossible to turn over in that water. It takes a lot of effort because of how dense it is. So we'll talk about those risks as well here in a second, but we just ask that you limit your caffeine and any alcohol substances that you take prior to floating. So will I sink? What if I sink? And what if I don't float? You will float, guaranteed. That water is so extremely dense. It's at a 1.3 specific gravity, so you have no choice but to float. And in all honesty, your body feels it can feel heavy after your float. Like when you sit up in the water, there's been times I feel like I'm just sitting up and I'm like, have this whole weight because my body was weightless. And now I have to exert this energy to sit up. So when it comes to turning over, it's very difficult to turn on your side. You can't, in fact, there's no way you can float on your side without flotation devices, because what will happen is your body surface area is trying to match up with that specific gravity in the dense water. So it just naturally takes you to the most body surface that you have, which is along your back. And the fascinating part is the heavier people are, the more likely they are to float because of that body density process and how that our water is so dense. They kind of work against each other to keep you so buoyant. When you float, your body is out of the water. And so we are constantly recommending to people that after they shower, they dry off their face and their upper body. That will keep you warmer in that float. Plus, you don't want to touch your face. You want to avoid any of that salt getting in your eyes. Because it is so salinated, it's not going to feel very good. So we recommend that you dry that body, dry the upper torso, and you're going to stay a lot warmer in that float because there's so much of your body exposed. We do provide earplugs. Earplugs are not necessary to float. They're not necessary to keep sound out. A lot of people like to use them to keep the salt water out of their ears. And so when you do come in, we instruct that you put those earplugs in prior to showering so that you get a really good seal and can keep that water out. Now, fear not, I don't float with earplugs. I actually like the water on my eardrum and in my ear canal. But I will use the vinegar solution that we provide. We have a 50-50 water and vinegar solution that will help dissolve that salt. And it's a good idea to use that if you choose not to use earplugs, or even if you do choose to use the earplugs. It's just good to get that in your ear and dissolve it a little bit. It won't hurt your ears at all. We also have other types of earplugs. In fact, we've had a lot of feedback. We're going to be getting the wax earplugs, the Max earplug, so that can really seal off that area for those of you who are sensitive to that. Let's see. Some other questions we get, like you're in there an hour, so we always recommend that you use the restroom services prior to floating. There are some contraindications to floating. If you are on chemotherapy, we ask that you do not float. We get it because that's in your system, and that will actually get into the water. So we don't allow people on chemotherapy, active chemotherapy, to float. If you have like an ostomy bag or anything like that, we have had people able to float. You treat it just like you do when you're swimming. Most of the time that's out of the water. It doesn't even touch, but we do ask that you protect that so that it doesn't come in contact with the water at all. But that has never been a problem in our situation. We do allow service animals. We have had some veterans in here who've had some service animals and other individuals. So we do allow for service animals. That we haven't had an issue with that. So we want to be able to provide that because flotation therapy is so good for PTSD and TBIs and anxiety. So we encourage those to consider that. There are a lot more questions that I didn't cover today, but I think that covers the majority of what we get asked on a regular basis. So, but bottom line, don't be afraid to just call us up and ask. We're all very comfortable asking questions or answering those questions. My team is wonderful at providing space for people, and it's a safe space here. And that's really what we want to get across all the time, is just how safe it is to be here and be yourself and process whatever it is that's going on in your life at that time. This is the place to do it. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And just remember, it's perfectly okay to stay salty.